It's ClipperBlog Live. Andrew Hahn here with our national panel from Brooklyn, Charlie Widows.
Hey guys.
From, I think he's in Los Angeles, Michael Shagrin.
Hey everybody.
Northern Alabama's Nick Flint. And live from Staples, Jordan Heimer and Kevin Arnovitz. Kevin, Jordan, let's start with you guys. What were your thoughts from this Clippers victory, 107 Hornets 98? They kind of squeaked by on this one, didn't they? Oh, it looks like we've lost them.
Great timing. Masters of
Perfect.
timing.
Okay, so while we wait for them to reconnect, Charlie, seems like the Clippers squeaked by on this one, right?
They did. Yeah. To me, it was so funny because you got, I guess a half of the trade that got Chris Paul coming to town, and those two guys were. It was just like last year when they were 1-14. I mean, they were or 1-13. They weren't going to win probably, but they just played their ass off and made some play. It was, I mean, literally with Aminu, it was just like the beginning of last season where he was making 3-pointers. And Gore, I mean, it was kind of a trip for me to watch. Gordon was awesome, but had some turnovers. I don't know. Chris Paul was great. They won. It wasn't very pleasant for me to watch, not as a Clipper fan, but as a basketball fan.
Michael, what do you think?
Yeah, it was neither pleasant as a Clipper fan or a basketball fan. It felt like the Clippers before we went on our nice little tear of a 13 out of 15 winning spell, and we just played down to the opponents. I mean, we didn't play our game. We played with no intensity. We went out there with no urgency whatsoever. And the Hornets, who weren't even playing for any sort of playoff spot, they went out there, they outworked us. They took better shots than us. They were more patient than us, and yet they played with a little more urgency than us. It was not a good sight to watch, and if we played like we did in the first three quarters, at any point during the playoffs, I would be infinitely worried.
And here they are.
Here we go.
They are back. And instead of going to you, Nick, let's
Welcome back, fellas.
Thanks.
Good to be back.
So Kevin, Jordan, what are your thoughts from this game? The one that the Clippers squeaked by, almost stole, you could say.
2 hours and 41 minutes for that. I mean, I think the Angels turned in a 220 last night. I mean, that was atrocious. I mean, the whole virtue of NBA basketball versus the other major sports is, roughly the length of a slightly long motion picture. But 2 hours, I mean, it was like Bertolucci's 1900. It was outrageously long.
I was just thrilled to be here. Excitement in the Staples Center. Come on, playoff clinching. I guess not playoff clinching. No, it was an ugly win. It was certainly a win where the hope pregame was that Chris Paul was going to get some rest. And instead, of course, he had to do his patented doing everything in the third quarter down the stretch. And it was a little bit of that disappearing Blake thing that we talked about so much last year, where he was explosive in the first quarter, had 17 or 19 by the end of the first quarter, and basically didn't hear from him again for the rest of the game.
I guess two questions. I had one, and then Jordan, you just said something that made me think of another one. Did they say something about resting those guys? Did anyone mention rest?
No one specifically mentioned rest. There were some pregame quotes either from this game or from the off day yesterday from Vinny saying that obviously they'd like to get rest if they could. I guess I meant only the expectation was here you have a Hornets team that's not playing for anything. You'd like to think that maybe it could be that rare easy win where by midway through the third you've got Chris Paul and Blake on the bench, but obviously it didn't turn out that way.
Right. And then, I mean, the other thing is everyone was talking about how Gordon and Aminu would have this revenge kind of thing. I mean, I kind of don't buy that. I think they just kind of play hard and they want – I mean, obviously they want to win, but they look kind of just like they did as Clippers. Did you guys catch up with those guys at all?
I spoke to Eric this week. I think he was excited about coming back. I don't think he's a vengeful sort, but to your point, and I think you tweeted this in the game, from my experience, Eric Gordon always plays hard.
Right.
I don't think he's a guy who ever dogs it. Aminu had a nice game. I mean, he's going to be a nice little player, I think.
Yeah, Aminu was really impressive, I thought. Like, not only, I mean, I don't know if it came across on the telecast, but he was playing good defense. He was out there on the perimeter looking for steals. He was playing tough on double teams against Blake. And every once in a while, he still has that, like, newborn baby fawn thing where he doesn't seem to, like, know how his legs work yet. But there's a lot less of that and a lot more, like, nice touch on the putbacks around the rim. I was impressed.
You know, Vinny didn't play him a lot. And I think Monty Williams, really good coach, particularly on the defensive end. And Aminu looks like a more, I don't want to say a more refined player, but certainly a more engaged player.
Right.
I know Nick Flint is not an Aminu fan, but I'm telling you.
No, actually, I was going to say that I think it's the perfect situation for him to be either on a winning team where he feels very motivated when he gets minutes on the bench, or on a team like with New Orleans where he can come out there and just really get into it. He's a leader for a small forward / really small power forward tweener in college. And, yeah, tonight I wish we would have seen more of that with the Clippers. But moving along, I don't have any good questions. I initially thought I might just go ahead and ask about what you guys see going forward into the playoffs. But also I'm wondering about Mo Williams kind of fading down the stretch here, you could say, in terms of consistency. And DeAndre Jordan, again, this season has been up and down for different stretches. What do you guys see in regards to their importance going into the playoffs here?
Jordan's going to be an important matchup, particularly with Memphis, and it's looking increasingly like Memphis will be the matchup, barring the Lakers laying an egg up in Sacramento. He's going to be important. Size matters in Memphis. And not only, obviously, the front line, but Conley's a guy who's made his living on dribble penetration. And he's really become a nice pick-and-roll player. Not so much for the roll, but just for the penetration that comes off the screen. He knows how to use a screen, and he knows how to turn down a screen. And I just think DJ is going to be essential in that series. Tonight, I don't worry so much. I think, Kenyon was a logical choice. I still think Vinny might be a bit selective with DeAndre, but I think, again, the matchup against Memphis will necessitate that he's on the floor for 30 minutes, so long as he can stay on the floor and not get into foul trouble.
Yeah, and Mo, I don't worry about that much. I mean, he's been up and down since coming back from the injury, but he was hot for the first 3 or 4 games. Now he's cooled off a little bit, and look, that's Mo. He's going to keep taking those shots, basically the same shots, the threes from the corner and those little teardrop runners, and sometimes he's going to make them, sometimes he's going to miss them. I think in some ways the bigger story coming out of this game is obviously Caron Butler left with a hip contusion. It's an interesting thing. I said to Kevin during the game, how much does it hurt the Clippers if Caron Butler's not there for the playoffs? I guess meaning, does it hurt them at all? Aren't Nick Young, Randy Foye, and Mo Williams the most effective wing players the Clippers have had the last 20 or 30 games? And this is such a bad thing if that's the rotation going forward.
I'd rather see Caron out there than not out there. Every minute Caron isn't there is Bobby Simmons probably taking, a minute. It does, I prefer Young come off the bench. I know he had an explosive night last week, but I'm not ready to deem him to be a responsible citizen.
Not ready for an injection of swag.
He's played responsible citizen defense, though. And Caron Butler, for all his reputation as a responsible citizen, hasn't always in the second half.
Mo had a couple nice passes today. I think we tend to forget that, particularly in Cleveland, he's capable of doing that. Foye is obviously the story, and this is now maybe not sustainable from a career standpoint, but he's a guy that, Chris Paul really knows how to find. There was a really nice hockey assist with Mo. Chris penetrating out to Mo over in the corner. And, look, ideally and theoretically that should help Blake. It didn't really translate to anything tonight just because, Foye was the final destination on so many of those half-court possessions.
And DJ Foster said something in Lob City Ledger a few nights ago, which was so true tonight. which is that in the past, Randy Foye of last season, might start hot and then cool off like he did tonight, miss 6 or 7 shots in a row, and that would be the last you'd hear from Randy Foye. He'd kind of revert to a defensive player and not look for his own shots. And I think that's a new thing this year to see Randy Foye come back from those cold streak with 3 huge shots in the fourth. And, are we thrilled as Clipper fans to be counting on Randy Foye hitting huge shots in the playoffs? Maybe not. But it's surprising how much better that feels than I thought it would 2 months ago.
I mean, the offense tonight was just awful in terms of schematics. Obviously they got bailed out by a bunch of long threes, but this was really rudimentary stuff, and it was sleepwalking. I don't, and it doesn't bother me. I don't think this necessarily dictates anything going into next weekend. It's funny, New York might be tanking for the 8 on Wednesday night. Atlanta doesn't really have anything to play for at this point. I think they've pretty much clinched up. I think they've pretty much solidified home court against Boston. So those 2 games should be interesting. I was talking with one Clipper official, and we joked that, in a perfect situation, the Clippers win in Atlanta, and then, like Major League teams used to do, they used to send their starting pitchers ahead a game, to get them rested. In a perfect world, Chris and Blake will be on a plane from Atlanta actually back to Los Angeles, not even enter New York airspace.
Right.
Because you just send those guys ahead for Saturday, because that's the ideal situation. Is Wednesday night is I suspect Charlie Widows will be at the game, and I hope Charlie Widows gets a whole diet of Trey Tompkins. That would be really cool.
Yes.
By the way, Trey's got. I love watching Trey warm up. Tompkins is a guy I'd love to see more of. But
always enthusiastic.
That's a different conversation for a different season, I guess.
I want a Bledsoe, Trey, pick and pop all night.
I think we're going to see plenty of that Wednesday night if the Clips can take care of business in Atlanta.
Or in Las Vegas this summer.
Oh, absolutely.
For the Summer League.
I'll be there.
Yeah.
All right, gents. We will talk to you then.
Last
Kevin
thought.
Jordan.
Oh,
Yeah.
wait, one last thought.
I don't think Kevin Arnovitz is taller than me. He just stands closer to the camera.
Kevin Jordan, thanks for your time.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks.
See you guys.
Okay.
That's fun.
So they just dropped a lot of knowledge on us.
Yeah, I think the Quran thing is obviously something we should mention. I know Kevin Pelton at one point tweeted that he never thought he'd say it, but they really miss Nick Young, and I agree. Just the length, whether he's not going to do what he did the other night where he went on fire, but they needed something.
Yeah, I agree. I also think that with all the Quran talk, I think this was remiss not to be thrown out. Quran's absence in today's game could not have been there couldn't have been like a stopper put up for all the negative impacts of it were Nick Young not to be out as well. I mean, Nick Young has been playing a lot of 3 for us in the last few games. I think it kind of started with the first win against the Thunder when he actually was able to guard Kevin Durant, and people weren't in awe of how awful he was. But besides the lack of ability of 3, my question for you guys, I was going to throw over to Arnovitz and Jordan, was when Kmart and DJ don't play well, and they decidedly did not play well tonight, what, with the shortened rotations in the playoffs, how often are we going to be seeing Reggie? Because I loved it. I thought the move to go to Reggie was great. Kenyon was not only pissed about his fouls and the way they were calling fouls, but he also didn't seem to be hustling all that much. DJ was having problems in terms of fouls and in terms of the way he shows on the pick and roll. He was just not playing well. And Vinny went with Reggie, and I thought it was a good move. It was a good energy move. With the short rotation, are we going to see any more of that in the playoffs?
It would be, and it would depend a lot on the situation, I think, like when it came, especially if we're going to start focusing in on Memphis, because it's looking like we're going to face them. Like, let's say DeAndre struggled through the first. Is this me here? I'm seeing... Anyway, DeAndre, struggles through the first, maybe against Gasol. They take him out. You're not feeling that comfortable with Kenyon Martin for some reason later on in the second. You might see Reggie come in against like a Maurice Spates or whatever at center rather than like Marc Gasol. I don't think that you can risk Reggie against a Mark Gasol or Zach Randolph quite as much as you risk Kenyon Martin against Zach Randolph or one of those guys because he's just a stronger defender.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. I alluded to it today in what I wrote about the rest. I think there's definitely a role for Reggie Evans on a playoff team, obviously, especially one that tends to, get involved in these kind of skirmishes every single night. And so, I think part of it is whether it's aesthetically pleasing or not, it works in their favor. I mean, they get under people's skin, they get to the line, and Evans is going to be a part of that. I don't really think that DeAndre or Kenyon Martin really fluctuate that often in what they do. So I'm not sure it's really going to be a dictating factor other than just foul trouble. I don't see them having a great game or a bad game. It's just kind of who's in foul trouble, who's doing okay.
Yeah,
it's really, I just wish that DeAndre was really, really good and really engaged every night. So that's between like Kenyon and Reggie forward, which would be much better in terms of the Clippers' advantage, like for a big-time defensive lineup, than like, okay, so who are we going to have play makeshift center for 10 minutes now?
It's really unfortunate that Reggie's basically going to fall out of the rotation once the playoffs start. I know all the fans really love him, and we all love his energy, but for the things that he can bring, it's such a specific niche that Reggie can contribute. It's just not going to be there. It might not be there in any series, but other than foul trouble, I can't see how he's going to get in there. But talking about Memphis for a second, because it seems like they're the likeliest first-round matchup. It's not a lock, though, and this is something I've been wanting to talk to you guys about for a while, because you are much smarter individuals than me. Let's see here.
Here we go.
Ooh, baby.
We've got it actually work now.
Can you guys all see that?
Yeah.
Okay, let me bring this up for the main screen. That is something called the 4 factors of basketball and the SRS. Nick, you want to go ahead and explain what those two things are?
Yeah, your 4 factors basically are the keys to whatever efficiency. You've got possessions, which is your offensive rebounding rate, and your turnover rate. So how many extra possessions you gather in off of misses, how many balls you cough up or don't cough up. And then you've got your efficiency in scoring, which is effective field goal percentage. That's your shooting from the field, plus the fact that three-pointers are worth whatever, half a field goal more than a regular field goal, whatever you want to say. And then SRS, the General Basketball Reference. And that is probably the best single statistic for determining how good a team has been over the course of the season. It accounts your differential and strength of schedule, although it does not account for stuff like who you played on back-to-backs, which is sort of, that can be a little iffy.
Okay, so what I've put up here is basically the, obviously you can see at the top, effective field goal percentage, turnover rate, offensive rebounding rate, free throw rate, and then the SRS at the end. You'll see on the left it says C, that's for Clippers, G is for Grizzlies, M is for Mavericks, N is for Nuggets. Those are basically the only teams that the Clippers are likely to see in the first round. I know that, Charlie, you don't really care who the Clippers play. They're going to roll through whoever in the first round.
No,
Michael?
It's not that. It's not that they're going to roll through. I just don't see the chances to be much better for any one matchup.
And Michael, you really don't want to see the Grizz. You and DJ are on the everyone's scared of the Grizz bandwagon, and Nick and I could care less about the Grizzlies. So, Charlie, starting with you, does any of this mean it? Like, these are all differentials with the rankings in parentheses.
Okay.
Does any of this look like the Clippers have a distinct advantage over one versus another?
I guess this happened to me last time, and I guess I'll say it again. I think they actually have a disadvantage here against the Nuggets. I think I was just actually going back and forth with one of the Nuggets True Hoop bloggers tonight, and he was saying JaVale McGee is not making boneheaded plays anymore and just dominating on the glass and blocking shots. Kenneth Faried's a monster. They're deep. Lawson can make Chris Paul work. I look at these numbers and I mean, I guess they all kind of look pretty close, which is kind of why they're bunched up in the playoff seeding, I think. But yeah, I think Denver would be an unfavorable matchup, and then just any team with Dirk on it, I guess can get scary. But I don't. I think Denver and Memphis would be the teams that I think the Clippers would have the most trouble with.
I'm screen sharing right now, so you can't see, but I'm internet fiving you, Charlie, because I feel exactly the same way as you do.
Nice.
Michael, what do you think about all of this?
Well, I agree with the conclusion that Denver and Memphis, I think, are much worse matchups than the Mavericks. Mavericks would be certainly the favorable choice. But I think the Grizzlies are going to give us more problems than the Nuggets, because the Nuggets run. The Nuggets get out. They're the fastest team in the league. They do really well in the fast break. And while we like to slow it down and we're better when we slow it down, we do have a certain lineup that can really run, that can get out there and it can answer the fast break. And if that really doesn't go to our way, this obviously has some assumptions about Vinny Del Negro's ability to make adjustments, which I maybe shouldn't be making. But if we could slow it down and then speed it up and throw some loops into the offensive game plan and turn some defense into offense, then I think the Grizzlies thus become the better matchup. But I think that at least on this on this stat sheet, the turnover rate in terms of the Grizzlies really scared me. I mean, they're just not turning the ball over, and I mean if they can keep the ball, they have so many offensive weapons. If they give their one of their starters the chance to make the shot as opposed to giving up the ball beforehand, they're going to score, and they're going to score a lot. And once again, so scared of the Grizzlies.
Nick, can you hear us?
Maybe not.
Okay, let's see if you can hear us. No, I think he might just be watching a replay of Mad Men right now or something.
All right, there we go.
Okay.
There was an issue there because I was trying to bring up a completely another screen. So are we asking for my thoughts on what matchup I want?
Is there anything in this sheet that I brought up that
well, what I was trying to bring up was, those are the differentials. So it's, the Grizzlies, I think, have a slightly pretty average own turnover rate. That differential is just so high because they turn other teams over so much. But one of the things about just now, and, I've thought about the matchups a little bit, but the main thing is that in terms of the Grizzlies, if Zach Randolph is healthy and the whole season, right there with the Clippers in terms of competing for, the top 3, 4, 5 seed area, right there in SRS. Same thing for Denver. They've had injuries. They've made a trade now that probably I think has weakened them. I mean, JaVale McGee, I've seen him. I've watched some of their games. They're fun to watch. He's not wizarding it up quite as much, but at the same time, he's not Nene on the inside who would likely brutalize either Blake on little cross screens or DJ because he gets, Nene just works for position so quickly off the ball. But now that they have JaVale, Al Harrington is injured, which he's come way down since he was playing great early in the season. But Tyler still gives me, and originally I think I kind of had that championship fear from the Mavericks because they're the defending champ and all that. But Mar Odom, kind of like with the injuries that other teams have dealt with, he didn't pan out, not because of injury, but just because he isn't any good anymore. Brendan Haywood, but not a Tyson Chandler. I guess the one thing you would worry about with the Mavericks is that their strength is still defense, even without Tyson Chandler. Their offense can come and go. Jason Kidd has been really bad this season. He is ready to retire. So, that's great news if you're looking at a matchup between him and Chris Paul. But at the same time, could it be like last season where suddenly they find their stride? Or Rick Carlisle makes all the right adjustments to, take advantage of the the Clippers' certain defensive weaknesses. You know, they love to pressure the ball. If there's one thing I think the Mavericks can still deal with, it's ball pressure. They can calmly move the ball around. They can still work the ball inside or work the ball into the mid post. No one has an answer for Dirk. So they're fairly dangerous. The one thing I look at, who's the worst rebounding team, and I think that is Dallas. And then we talk about the other weaknesses. Dallas overall not as strong, and there's no speedy point guard scorer to worry about with them. Whereas with Memphis, you have two guys that could be working out of the post, like you know, you have Rudy Gay, you have Zach Randolph, you have Marc Gasol, whereas you only have Dirk with the Mavs. Charlie?
Yeah, I keep thinking about it. It's so crazy that if Denver hadn't made that trade, and I know that there were reasons, there were financial reasons, and maybe they didn't like his attitude or playing through pain, but had they not made that trade, that would be the scariest team to me. I mean, Nene, with what they have, if everyone's healthy, that would be terrifying in the playoffs, more so than Memphis, I think. That's all.
Yeah, especially with, you know, Gallinari.
Right.
Didn't even mention his name, and he's excellent. So.
Yeah.
Yep, that's the moving Nene out of the conference is the best thing that Brian Cook has done for the Clippers in 2 years. Yeah, when I look at this stat sheet, I mean, the only thing that really jumps out to me, because you can see the Clippers are kind of similar with a lot of these other teams, is that effective field goal percentage that the Grizzlies post up. That's the thing that I love, and that's why I feel like the Clippers are uniquely qualified to take down the Grizzlies. It's just that the Clippers don't turn the ball over much, and that's the thing that the Grizzlies rely on to generate a lot of offense. You've seen them.
Their only offense is, or pardon me, their only average on offense, even when, you know, they meet all these teams that they can actually force turnovers with. So if they're not forcing turnovers, you're looking at like probably a bottom 10 offense in the NBA.
I think it's actually, this is a season-long stat line, right? Right, Andrew? This is
current up to the 15th.
I think it would look a lot different, not only in terms of how the Grizzlies score, but how effectively they score. If we only looked at when Zach Randolph has come back and after the first 5 games after which he came back, because it took him a couple games to get back in his groove, but since then he hasn't been playing like the Zach Randolph from last year's playoffs, who was playing unconscious, but I mean, he's playing really well, and it's not like they had to drop anyone. He's replacing minutes that went to Maurice Spates. So, I mean, they've taken a huge step up in terms of their half-court offense when he gets in the game. And even if they're not playing, even if the numbers aren't so decidedly so much better than they were before he was out, once the playoffs start and Spates gets less minutes and Randolph ends up getting more minutes, I think we're going to see whatever the statistical trend is grow even more. And you know what? I may be wrong. The extra minutes during the playoffs may weigh on Zach Randolph's out-of-shape body, but they may not. He may get in the groove, and that's what scares me, because last year's Grizzlies team in the playoffs was unreal, and this year they have Rudy Gay, who's their leading scorer.
Well, I hope this answered Near R.Y. Grass Twitter question. Do you think Clips match up well and have a good chance against Memphis? Because they apparently tweeted that in, and we just spent the last 10 minutes talking about it.
We aim to please.
A little bit clairvoyant, though.
Yeah, the last thing on this whole Clippers-Grizzlies business is I've been watching the last few games, begging them to lose, basically, so the Clippers can lock up that 4 seed. And I don't know what it is. They played the Bobcats, and who was it? I think they played someone yesterday that wasn't that good either. And they're just squeaking out these victories. I'm not sure what's going on with that Grizzlies team, but I feel like everyone is just thinking back to that last year, that magical second-round run the Grizzlies had. And
I think that's a great point. Same with Dallas. Anyone who is thinking about Dallas with last year in mind, it's not the same team. Just like, you know, when we entered the season, we thought, oh, Memphis, they did this last year, now they're getting Rudy Gay back, so this is what they're going to be. Well, whatever Rudy Gay does takes away from whatever someone else was doing last year, and it doesn't just, it's not a plug and play thing. We don't know if Zach Randolph, even if he is better than he was when he first got back, We don't know if he's going to do what he did last year. He was phenomenal in the playoffs last year.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah.
I mean, they're not a scary offensive team at all. They don't shoot the three well. To me, it's will the Clippers be able to get shots off against them because they are really good defensively.
Well, that's actually why.
Yeah, they become so far the last 20 games basically, and Zach Randolph scored a lot. But they become a slightly above average offensive team, but still good.
I think he's talking to you, Michael.
All right. Well, I think the Mavs have, if any team has changed in terms of their roster composition, it's the Mavs, because the anchoring aspect of the Mavs was Tyson Chandler in the middle playing defense, and the Grizzlies, they may not be able to come up with the same sort of magic that they did last time around. One, because they were the underdog. Two, because there wasn't a wing ball stopper, because that's really what Rudy Gay is. Rudy Gay gets the ball. He's kind of a ball stopper. He's not a great passer. And so, yeah, they may not be able to create that same sort of magic, but I'm more worried, if we're going to use last year as a standard, more worried about the Grizzlies because they added a really high-quality player at a spot where they were a little bit weak, while the Mavericks lost the guy who might become the Defensive Player of the Year. That's why I don't worry about the Mavericks, but I think, at least amongst this panel, the question is between the Grizzlies and the Nuggets. The Mavs seem to be a distant third amongst this crew.
Mm-hmm. The only thing I don't want to see if we play Dallas is Jason Terry's smug face as he does that airplane thing, hitting some random clutch three that you know he's going to shoot.
But then Swaggy P will just be able to, throw his threes down into his pockets after every single shot he
injection.
Makes. Not a single shot goes down for him where he doesn't celebrate in that manner.
Eddie Neves tweets in with a question. CP3 is the only reason Vinny Del Negro still has a job. Is there a chance VDN is back next year? Please say no. This will transition to us into our Chris Paul MVP discussion. But let's answer this question first. Charlie, do you think Vinny will come back next year?
No, I would say no. I know Neil O'Shea is a very smart guy, and I think if he could have chosen, he would have chosen Dwayne Casey in the first place over Vinny. The problem is Neil's contract isn't guaranteed for next year. It's up after this year, and an extension's not guaranteed. So he might not have the leverage that he should within the organization to make those kinds of moves. Also, Vinny's still going to be able to be had cheap, and he is going to be coming off of a playoff year, whether it's in spite of what he did or not. I mean, as the question just said, Chris Paul had a lot to do with that. But I don't think he'll be back next year. I hope.
Nick, what do you think?
Yeah, my thoughts exactly. It'll probably be tempting for them to, at least take a look at him, like, whatever, kick the tires. The vehicle is still running. Maybe we don't have to upgrade just yet, but I definitely, going into the CP3 talk, let's say this team has a better defensive coach, a better overall coach, and that he puts together kind of like, Dwayne Casey turned the exact same roster that Toronto had last season into an average defensive team. Let's say that the Clippers got Dwayne Casey, and this is like I think a top 10, just outside the top 10 defensive team throughout the season. We're talking about CP3 as a definite top 3 for MVP. And Kevin Durant, who, have they been better? Yes. But if this team had more wins like it would, was fighting for a 2 seed, I think, then imagine how different things would be. And yet we have Vinny Del Negro and a pretty bad defense. So,
Michael?
Yeah, I would like not here next season, I think.
Yeah, I don't think he's here next season, and I really hope that O'Shea is. And I think, regardless of how much Donald Sterling enjoys the presidential look of Vinny Del Negro, I think he realizes that in order to keep Chris Paul and Blake Griffin, which is his ultimate goal, that it would be good to keep the GM who brought them there in the first place and who has done a fairly unbelievable job of surrounding them with talent. But I think if Vinny goes deep into the playoffs, you can't really fire him. I mean, if he gets to the conference finals,
well, you're not firing him. It wouldn't be firing him.
It would just be letting him go.
It would be the equivalent of firing him.
It would be the equivalent.
Well, except for when it comes to the Clippers, there's a key difference. One thing, when it comes to the Clippers, there's a key difference. Firing would involve paying two people's contracts. And
you can't get sued. You're right. But nonetheless, I don't think he stays because I don't think that we're gonna get that far. But Vinny just doesn't have it. I mean, he doesn't have the vision for the future that this team would need. He was good for what we needed him for last season. I mean, he came in to keep a young team who was not really had playoff aspirations, to keep them motivated and to keep them playing. So maybe the next year, or the year after, they make it to the playoffs. And he did a good job with that. And I like the guy a lot, but he doesn't engage in the chess match, and he doesn't think strategically in the way that you need to in order to advance far into the playoffs. And it's just that simple. And if they want to move past where they were wherever they got to in this season's playoffs next year, then you're going to have to replace him with someone else.
I'm going to spend 10 seconds here and finally apologize to Vinny Del Negro, because I've been saying I wanted to do this for several games now, and we know Vinny Del Negro was not Greg Popovich or Rick Carlisle or, heck, probably not even Scott Brooks, but he's done a decent job this season. He was terrible at the first, and you can actually see that there's some kind of improvement going on with the way the team is playing now versus the first half of the year. If he was going to take the brunt of the punishment when they were going up and down in that middle part of March, then he should get some of the credit when they're reeling off 13 out of 15, taking down Oklahoma City twice. So, Vinny Del Negro, admirable job. We really like what you did, but we really want Stan Van Gundy or Rick Carlisle or any number of people. That's the big thing. There's a lot of quality coaches that'll be available this offseason, and that would be one of the big factors.
What I'm really worried about...
My question in regards to Stan Van Gundy, who would... Go ahead.
All right, very quickly. My real worry isn't that he's bad in the regular season, as a bad coach in the regular season, but when he has to go 7 games up against the same guy, and he has to make adjustments from game to game, and it's very easy to make an adjustment between games. Even if it's a small adjustment, it can have a huge impact. And I just don't think, not that Vinny won't make adjustments, but he's just not going to make the right adjustments. It's just not going to happen.
I think Vinny is actually not terrible between game adjustments. It's those in-game adjustments that he seems to really struggle with. That's just my opinion.
I think he's pretty atrocious at both. I'm gonna be frank. I don't think there's really much much of his.
Nick, what were you gonna say?
I was just gonna say that my personal preference for most of this, and now Stan is not going to be with the Magic after everything that's gone on there. We just had a poll come out that said he's basically the least liked coach in the NBA by players. As much as I'd love to have his defensive system come in. Thinking about CP3, Blake, and those guys, are they going to be able to look at, well, we're probably going to win more with Stan Van Gundy here, or are they going to think, wow, that's the guy that screams all the time, and I don't like him very much? How is that going to limit the hiring options there?
That's a good point. And if the Clippers did miraculously get Stan Van Gundy, all these Clipper fans, these ClipperBlog commenters that are pining for some kind of random Dwight Howard trade, that's not going to happen then.
No.
That's a good point.
Man.
Okay, let's move on to something a little bit brighter. Chris Paul's MVP hopes. Does anyone think that Chris Paul has a realistic shot at getting MVP? Nick, you want to start us off? No, Nick is not going to start us off because he can't hear us again. Michael, how about you start us off?
Go ahead. You got it.
Hate that delay. All right. Are we doing the delay again? That's great. Anyway, probably not. He's probably top 5. That's about where I draw the line. Defensively, LeBron better impact. Durant's on a team that's won more games. Blah blah blah. Somebody else take it.
Yeah, I think it just hands down goes to LeBron. When you have that good of a season and the numbers don't lie at a certain point. And I also think there's a little bit of moral hazard in making this response and claiming Chris Paul as the MVP, because if you were to make a good case for that, you'd have to really denigrate the rest of the talent on the Clippers roster and say that he is holding up an entire roster of brouhaha.
Yeah, I have no problem doing that, actually. I'm not one to kind of look for reasons to make a conversation out of not a conversation. So in most years, LeBron James is the MVP, and what's the point of a conversation? Because he's the best player. But I do think, I was talking to Jordan when he wrote his ESPN LA piece, which suggested that Paul would be a candidate. And I think we agreed that he is first of all, he's second to LeBron in every sort of overall value stat, wins added, per, adjusted per, all those kinds of things. It's not like the numbers aren't there and you're trying to pick a narrative to boost a guy up. The numbers are there. I mean, he's the second best guy. And I really, the Clippers aren't a playoff team without Chris Paul. They're not even a playoff team. And maybe then you say you reverse the trade and maybe they're a playoff. Without Eric Gordon, obviously they're not a playoff team either. I think Kevin Durant, to me, is one of those guys where there's no he's not LeBron James, and his team isn't that much better, and therefore there's no reason to have a conversation out of nothing. But with Chris Paul, I really do think that the value, which I hate to parse those words, but the value he adds does make it kind of a two-man conversation in my mind.
I'm going to double back on the last question and just ask you a question, Charlie. What if we didn't have Vinny Del Negro as a coach? Let's say we had Rick Carlisle, or Greg Popovich, or Tom Thibodeau. This Clippers team without Chris Paul is a playoff team.
You're basically taking the second best player in basketball and then adding like the top 2 coaches in basketball.
Right. Yeah, you see what I did there?
Yeah, I mean, I think those coaches are really good, and so the team would be a lot better with those coaches than the present coach. But without Chris Paul and with one of those guys, that maybe they're a playoff team. I just see what Thibodeau's done with Chicago without Rose for all this time. Maybe the Clippers are the 8th seed or the 7th seed. But I don't know about that.
Okay. I just think that Durant is now officially out of the conversation. The Clippers just took them down twice in basically a week. You can't really say Durant is the MVP when everyone was looking for an excuse that LeBron shouldn't be when they had that bad stretch recently. But here's an interesting thing about Chris Paul's season this year. Charlie touched on it. He's third in earned wins, and Rose, who won the MVP last year, was 9th.
Well, that was a horrible decision last year to give it to Rose. That was a narrative that took over, and it was just
took over. Exactly.
Right. And Chris Paul has a great narrative this year in basically turning the worst franchise in basically North American sports into a legitimate.
Right. And I think that narrative is nice, and it's a nice supplement, but I think what's important that's what
like you said, the stats back it up.
Derrick Rose shot like 40% last year. Chris Paul's shooting 50, 40, 80 or something. I mean, that's his, field goal three-point free throw. He's way better than Derrick Rose was last year.
Right. Okay, so let's look ahead. Let's look ahead to Tuesday's game at Atlanta. I think the Hawks have not locked in their home court advantage yet. They only have a 1-game lead in the loss column over Boston, so they still have a little bit something to play for. Nick, why don't you give us what the favorable matchup would be, Clippers versus Hawks?
What do I like there? I think I'll go with whoever is starting at center against DeAndre Jordan. I think you could see some real damage on the boards from him. I'm sure that we'll have Chris Paul featured in the cringeworthy matchup if you want to go cringeworthy for the Hawks, but we'll see.
Nick stealing someone else's answers.
Yeah.
Who's playing the 4? Who's their 4?
I think Josh Smith is their 4. I think
All right.
Marvin Williams has been starting at 3 for them.
Right. That's an awesome
Or
match.
actually,
Josh Smith
yeah.
is great. Wow. Yeah, I guess
Michael-
cringeworthy. Yeah, go.
Michael, the unfavorable matchup. Who's unfavorable for us?
I mean, I don't really think we have all that many unfavorables, but I think Josh Smith is pretty unfavorable. I mean, he can shoot from the outside, and he will shoot from the outside. He also can drive to the hole in a way that may give Blake issues. But wait, I was watching the Knicks Hawks game today, and Jeff Teague was kind of tearing through the defense when he decided he wanted to. And I'm not saying that he would give Chris Paul any problems, but if he makes it past Chris Paul, it's those types of point guards. The Jeff Teague. I'm not throwing Jeff Teague into this category, but he played like them today, like a Tony Parker or a Ty Lawson, who can just, when they get in the lane, just can kind of slash through and cut around and give themselves an open layup or pass it out. But I guess I gave 2 moderately unfavorable matchups to equal 1 unfavorable matchup.
Charlie
Yeah.
or cringeworthy?
Yeah, but Jeff Teague's a nice player, by the way. The cringeworthy matchup will forever be Chris Paul versus the Atlanta Hawks because they took Marvin Williams instead of him, and so they will cringe every time he enters the highlight factory. So that's the cringeworthy matchup.
Yeah, I'm sure the Atlanta front office is cringing at that too.
That's right. Yeah.
Okay, so that's about gonna wrap this up for Charlie Widows, Michael Shabrin, Nick Flint. I'm Andrew Hahn. Thanks for tuning in.